My name is Clara Hayes, and for most of my life, I believed peace could only be found in silence. I live in a small house that faces the sea, a place that breathes with the rhythm of the tides and holds the whispers of the past. The mornings here are quiet, the kind of quiet that lets you hear your thoughts, the good ones and the ones you would rather forget. I make tea every day at 6, watch the sunrise pour its golden light over the water, and tell myself that today, I will not think about Henry. But of course, I always do. Henry was my husband, my anchor, my storm. He was a sailor, a man who loved the sea more than the land he walked on. When the ocean took him, it felt like it took everything else too: laughter, color, warmth. The house by the sea became a museum of memories, and I became its lonely keeper. People in town stopped visiting after the funeral. They said time would heal me, but time doesn't heal, it only hides the pain under new routines. So I built mine carefully. Morning tea, gardening, reading, pretending. Until Ethan Cole moved into the house next door. He came one afternoon when the sun was sharp and the air smelled like rain. A young doctor, they said, quiet, polite, always reading. He was fixing the fence that separated our gardens when we met. I remember how his voice startled me, warm, confident, with a kindness I hadn't heard in years. "Good afternoon, ma'am," he said, smiling. "Your roses are beautiful. I hope I didn't disturb them while fixing this." And just like that, a stranger's voice filled a space that had been empty for far too long. Over the weeks that followed, our paths crossed more often. A wave in the morning. A shared smile in the market. A small conversation about the weather, or the sea, or the loneliness that hung in the air like mist. He had a gentleness that reminded me of Henry, but softer, more deliberate, as if he understood what silence costs. One evening, I slipped on the back steps while watering the plants. It wasn't serious, but I felt the sting in my ankle. Before I could even call for help, Ethan appeared, almost as if he had been waiting for me to fall. He examined my ankle carefully, his touch professional but light, his voice calm. "You'll be all right," he said, wrapping a soft bandage around it. "Just stay off it for a day or two. I'll check on you tomorrow, if that's all right." It should have been a simple offer, but the way he said tomorrow made me feel seen again, like someone had noticed that I still existed. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the look in his eyes, kind but heavy, like he carried stories he didn't dare tell. And I wondered, for the first time in years, if I was allowed to feel warmth again. Days turned into weeks. Our conversations grew longer. He would often stop by with groceries or a new book he thought I would like. Sometimes, we would sit by the shore, not saying much, just listening to the sea breathe. He spoke of his work, long hours, endless patience, faces that blurred together. But when he talked about helping people heal, there was a light in him I couldn't ignore. One evening, as the sunset painted the waves in copper and rose, he asked me quietly, "Do you ever think the sea remembers?" "The sea." I smiled. "It remembers everything. Every secret, every goodbye." He nodded, his gaze lost in the horizon. "Then maybe it remembers my father too." It was the first time he had ever spoken of his family. His voice trembled slightly, and though he didn't explain, I sensed pain beneath the words, a sorrow that mirrored my own. That night, as I watched him walk back to his house, I realized something dangerous. I was beginning to care. Not just in a polite, neighborly way, but in a way that made me afraid. Afraid of feeling again. Afraid of losing again. afraid that the sea wasn't done taking from me. The next morning, I found a small note slipped under my door. It said only, "Meet me by the old pier at dusk. There's something I need to tell you." I don't know why, but my heart raced as I read it. The pier was the same place Henry had last set sail from, the place where they later found his boat drifting without him. At dusk, the sky turned the color of fading fire. Ethan was already there, standing by the edge, hands in his pockets, staring at the waves. When he saw me, he smiled, but it was a fragile smile. "I didn't mean to worry you," he said softly. "I just thought you should know something." He hesitated, as if measuring every word. "My father, he worked for a man years ago. A sailor. His name was Henry Hayes." The world seemed to tilt for a moment. My breath caught. My Henry. My husband. Ethan's eyes searched mine. "He saved my father's life once. In a storm off the coast. My father always said he owed him everything." The wind picked up, tugging at my hair, carrying the sound of waves crashing against wood. I didn't know what to say. I only nodded, feeling tears rise uninvited. Ethan stepped closer, his voice low. "I think that's why I came here, Clara. Maybe I wanted to find the man who saved my father. Or maybe I just wanted to meet the woman he left behind." And then, silence. The kind of silence that holds 1,000 words. In that silence, the sea sighed, the sky darkened, and my heart began to stir in ways I thought it had forgotten. That night, as I lay in bed, I could still hear his voice, calm, kind, almost reverent. I didn't know what this connection meant or where it would lead. But deep down, I felt something awaken. Something fragile. Something hopeful. For the first time in years, I left the window open and let the sound of the sea sing me to sleep. It has been 3 months since that evening at the pier. 3 months since Ethan told me about my husband's final act of kindness. 3 months since something inside me began to bloom again. I still wake up early, make my tea, and sit by the window. But now, the silence feels different. It no longer presses on my chest. It listens with me. The sea still speaks, but I am learning to understand it again. Ethan visits often. Sometimes to check on me, sometimes to bring a book, and sometimes just to sit. He never stays too long, but his presence lingers, like sunlight after rain. He reminds me that grief does not disappear. It softens, reshapes itself, and makes space for new life. One morning, as I was tending to my garden, Ethan appeared at the fence. He looked pale, thoughtful. There was something heavy in his eyes. "Clara," he said quietly, "I need to tell you something. About your husband." My heart paused, caught between curiosity and fear. He handed me a small, weathered journal. The leather was cracked, the pages yellowed with salt. "My father kept this," he continued. "It belonged to Henry. He wanted you to have it, but he never found the courage to send it." I took the journal with trembling hands. For a long time, I could not open it. I was afraid of what the words might do to me. Afraid they might undo the fragile peace I had built. That night, I lit a candle, sat by the sea, and opened the journal. Henry's handwriting spilled across the pages, neat and steady, the way I remembered his voice. He wrote about the voyage, the storms, the laughter of the crew, and the calm nights when he thought of me. And then, near the end, I found the words that would stay with me forever. If I do not return, tell Clara that I never truly left. The sea is only a bridge between us. When she looks at the horizon, she will find me there, waiting. Tears blurred my vision, but for the first time, they did not hurt. They felt cleansing, like the tide washing over footprints in the sand. The next morning, I found Ethan waiting by the shore. He looked uncertain, as if he wasn't sure if I would forgive him for keeping the journal so long. I smiled. "Thank you," I said simply. "You gave me back something I didn't know I had lost." We stood there in silence, the sun warming our faces, the sea whispering between us. It was not love, not yet. It was something quieter. A shared understanding of loss and healing. A gentle promise that maybe, just maybe, it was time to begin again. That evening, I placed Henry's journal on the shelf beside his old compass. Then I opened the windows wide, let the wind carry in the salt and the sound of the waves. For the first time in years, I did not feel alone. The sea that once took everything from me was now returning something different. Not the past, but peace. Not the same love, but a chance to love differently. Life, I realized, does not wait for us to be ready. It simply arrives, again and again, like the tide returning to the shore. Sometimes I wonder how many of us are standing by our own sea, afraid to let go, afraid to begin again. Maybe the real healing begins when we stop waiting for the tide to bring back what was lost and start listening to what it's offering now. Tell me, if the tide returned to your shore today, what would you be brave enough to let it carry away? If this story touched you, remember to like, share, and subscribe for more gentle stories of love, loss, and quiet redemption. Until next time, this is Clara, from the house by the sea.